Okay, so we might get rained on. Sorry? No, this is not rain. Maybe we'll time it to be in the polytunnels at some point. But if you follow me, I'll just go through how we farm and what we do. If you've got any questions, just fire them at me. We've got loads of other growers here as well, so there's lots of experience about the type of farming that we do. Okay? All right, let's get going. Okay, hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, so apologies for the motorway. When the wind's coming this way and it's wet, the motorway sound really does come across. So I'm George Bennett, Sanderlane Farm. I run predominantly the vegetable part of the business, and my father does the animals. My wife looks after marketing, and my sister does the accounts. So it's a real family business. It's 100 acres. So if you can imagine that these polytunnels are one corner of the farm, and if you look at that field on the hill, that's the other corner. So it's roughly a square, and that's what 100 acres looks like. We are organic. We've been organic for well over 35 years, and there's interesting things that you have to do when you're an organic farm as opposed to a conventional farm. So how do you grow fertility, for example? So we are sat here in where it all starts for our vegetables. This is a clover mix. It's got lots of different types of clover, some high, some low, and what that does is actually it serves many different insects because they've got different heights, but also they have different root depths, so they actually are servicing much more of the root zone by having multi-species in here. Now, the reason why we use clovers is that they're a magic plant because they fix nitrogen from the air into the soil. So we are literally fertilizing the soil with these clovers in this field. So they're sat here for 2 to 3 years, and after 2 to 3 years, we've got lovely fertile soil that also crucially has soil structure. Soil structure is really important for resilience. Good soil structure drains freely when it's wet, but it also retains moisture when it's dry. So if you have really good soil structure, you can actually make use of that fertility, and the plants can thrive in that environment. So this is here for 2 to 3 years. We actually struggled to get this going because if you remember last year, we had those flash flooding in about September. I just planted all the green manure here, and all of it got washed away. So we do have a little bit of coverage here, but it was particularly bad in these 2 plots. So I'm using the chickens as a way to fertilize those plots that have not got enough green manures going. So in effect, I am actually buying chicken food for the chickens, and I'm getting money for the eggs, and they're fertilizing the ground, so it's in a closed loop. So a lot of organic farming is about having as closed loop system as possible, where you're growing your own fertility, you're growing your own pest management and disease management, and so you're in a closed loop. The only thing that we really buy are seeds, but everything else is produced on the farm. So having a small farm like this, and 100 acres is a small farm nationwide, but it's quite big for vegetable growing. It means that we can have the chickens as part of it. We've got pigs, we've got sheep, and they're all part of a holistic system. So the pigs, for example, will do an early spring ploughing for us, so that before we can get tractors on the ground, they will churn up the soil for us and buy us 2 to 3 weeks in the beginning of in the spring. The sheep will mow our green manures. If you mow a green manure, you accelerate the fertility building process. So rather than using a tractor to mow, we can use sheep to do it. And then what comes out their back end helps as well. So it's all about trying to have a system where every part of the enterprise is helping each other. Now, the other cool thing about organic methods of growing is that we talked about fertility, but also there's pest management. There's a couple of tools that we have in our toolbox for pest management. One is rotation. Rotation simply means that this plot of land will go through an 8-year cycle. 3 years of fertility management, then potatoes, then brassicas, then onions, then carrots, then squash, sweet corn, and then we start it all again. So there's each plot of land goes through a sequence. And the reason for that is that we're following that fertility gradient go down before we start up again. So potatoes are really hungry, they'll go at the beginning. Sweet corn, not so much, and squash, not so much, they'll be right at the end to manage that fertility gradient. But also, different weeds like different crops. So if you have the same crop in the same place year on year, everything will say, oh, I know it's coming up. This weed loves being under squash, or this pest loves eating squash. And so you get a build-up of pests and diseases, and that's what rotation is trying to counteract, is by moving things around the field. So, for example, a carrot fly might lay an egg in a carrot field. When it pops up next year and looks around for a carrot, it can't find a carrot because it's moved to a different part of the farm. So that's one example of how you might use rotation to manage things. The same is true for fungal infections on brassicas, as well as certain weeds that like certain crops. So rotation is really, really important. The other cool thing is biodiversity. Now that's absolutely critical to how we farm. We've made a real effort to encourage biodiversity on the farm with these tree alleys. You can see across the whole field that it doesn't look uniform at all. There's lots of different habitats. It's supporting lots of different insects and other animals. And that investment in biodiversity is now helping us, because we are getting an army of predators controlling the pests around us. So for example, on our brassicas, we get a lot of cabbage white butterfly and caterpillars. We now have predatory wasps that lay eggs inside the caterpillars, and they are eaten from the inside out. So we're not affected by caterpillars to a great extent at all, because it's being managed by the biodiversity around us. The same's true for beetles. They love slug eggs. The toads that are in the beetle banks, they eat slugs. So the list goes on and on and on. That biodiversity is a major part of our arsenal to control pests. And by the way, it's good for the environment. It makes what we feel like we're an oasis of biodiversity in this area, but it's self-interest biodiversity, and that's what I'm really interested in. The other thing I would say about trees is that there's a trend to incorporate trees within a vegetable production, and it's said that the best growing place for vegetables is within 20 meters of a forest edge. And so what we're trying to do is create a forest edge all the way throughout the field so that we can benefit from the trees. Trees give you wind breaks, so they stop the wind. If you stop the wind moving so much, the plants aren't battered around. You lose less moisture because you're getting less air whipping the moisture away. The roots are good for drainage. You get leaf mold, you get extra biodiversity, like higher level biodiversity, like birds in the trees as well. So trees bring such a load of benefits to a vegetable production, and that's why they are important. However, you can't move them. So we've got to orient them in lines, and we orient them north-south so that the whole field will get sun throughout the day. If it was east-west, then you'd have permanently shaded areas in the field. So we created these tree beetle banks about 4 years ago, and now we can just about see that the trees are really starting to take off and be much more mature. Right, we'll go over here and look at some actual crops.
How long did it take for you to get to this size? Because it's quite a large area to be doing vegetable growing on in this manner, right?
Yeah. So I guess I came back to the farm 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's been a gradual
Grow,
sort of grow a bit more, sell a bit more, grow a bit more, sell a bit more, that sort of stuff.
It's looking great.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to the good bits. The danger of such a large group is it takes a while to congregate. Okay, all right, so this is our squash rotation. All of these squash have been direct drilled, which means that we put the seed directly in the ground rather than creating them as plants in plant pots, seeds in plant pots. So this is, if you're a grower, you'd say that was pretty successful in terms of direct drilling. If we did this last year, it was horrible because we had cold nights yeah, things really didn't take off. But this is, I would say, a very successful direct drilled squash patch. The great thing about direct drilling means that when they do emerge, they're much stronger plants when they're young, so they will take off. They don't have to re-establish themselves in the soil. And they are also much better at coping with critters when they're at that young stage because they're much stronger plants. If you transplant squash, it's more, they're more developed, and you get much more accurate placing, and you get much more security that there'll be a plant in every hole, but they are vulnerable when you plant them on. So they are looking to find their roots and get into the soil, and at that stage they're weak to predators, to moisture and all sorts of things. So if you can direct sow, and by the way, it's a lot cheaper to direct sow because you haven't got all the labor, then it really works out well. So typically what I do is I do about 2/3 of my squash like this, and about 1/3 in plant pots, so that I've got the security of the plant pots if it doesn't work out. So this year they've both done really well. So expect to see lots of squash on the list for the.
How many have you done plants roughly, George?
I should know that. I don't know. It's probably about 9,000 or something like that.
9,000?
Yeah, something like that. So I actually raised myself about 1,500, and the rest I direct sowed. Underneath this, you can see that their tendrils are now beginning to spread. Just before they do that, we take the opportunity to plant green manure or clovers underneath the squash. And what that does is it gives you an extra year or half year of fertility building, because you're getting the clover going before the crop's actually finished. So when this comes to the winter time, that will be completely green. When the squash dies off, that will be completely green. And if it's green over winter, it's holding the soil together. If the rains come, it's not going to wash away soil, but also it's holding the fertility in the soil. So if you can get a lot of green, particularly over winter, then you really retain your soil health going forwards. So we've got, roughly speaking, about 30 different varieties of squash and pumpkin. So some are really good at storing, some are good sizes for our veg boxes, so they all have different purposes. But the ones that are typically very popular are things like butternut, which I personally find a bit boring, but they're they are very well known and very popular. But they do struggle in the UK climate, so you do need a year like we've had this year for butternuts to really thrive. But Crown Prince will be our standard go-to storing squash, which is a wonderful flavour, good texture, very dense, but they are quite big fruits. So good for catering, I would say. So
What are these ones?
these are Crown Prince, these ones. We've got Uchiki curry over there, and I'd have to look at my notes as to what those are. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah, I do have a big spreadsheet about exactly which row is which, but I should have boned up on that before I did this tour. But yeah, so we grow well over 300 types of vegetable. That's not, there are obviously 30 squashes, you rack up the numbers pretty quickly. But if you want to try and have as long a season as possible, but also if you want to try and insulate yourselves from whatever the season might throw at you, we have a lot of variety, and that variety gives us resilience. So some years, like this year, is fantastic for squash. We've found beetroot and carrots and all the direct sown stuff like parsnips really difficult this year because the perennial weeds have just started to take over. So given what the year is throwing at you, having lots of diversity around the farm means that something's going to do really well and something is going to do really badly. We're kind of growing for all eventualities, which makes it difficult sometimes for supply for things like OxFarmToFork, because there is that natural variability throughout the season. So every season will be slightly different. So I know that we're all trying to put on our list about what we think we're going to grow, but there is always wiggle room throughout, from season to season, and even within the season as well. So, for example, with the hot weather that we've just had recently, flea beetle has been a real challenge for a lot of our brassicas. So I think we've only got one grower here who's doing decent brassicas because he's got a special variety. But almost all the organic growers I know have got lace work in their kales because flea beetle has been a real problem. And that's really happened in the last 3 weeks. So before that, we had no flea beetle at all. So there, if you grow this way, there is a lot of resilience, but sometimes the predictability is not what it would be if we were in a conventional farm. Okay. Any questions?
Are you keeping any seed for squash?
So saving seed is a real skill, a skill that I don't have time for. So I do buy in seed. Certain things I will save if it's easy, but the biggest problem with saving your seed is cross-pollination. Particularly if you grow 30 types of squash, then you can't guarantee that a bee is only going to visit one type of squash. You'll get a big mix of whatever the progeny will be. So saving seed is a skill. If you're saving squash, you've got to put a rubber band around the flowers and then actually cross-pollinate yourself. So you can do it, but I'm too busy, and I let other people who are good at saving seed do that. Yeah. Good. Right, we're going to head over to the polytunnels. I should say just before we go, one of the other reasons that we have resilience and diversity in the farm is by having different growing methods. So everything you see here is field scale growing, but we also have the polytunnels and we have a no-dig market garden. And that different methods of growing means that at different times of the season and across years, we've got a chance of being more successful in one if the other one is not working. So having that different methods of growing is absolutely critical. Okay, we'll head over here.
We don't have a tractor. Yeah. So topping is.
Yeah.
So
Well, this is where chickens were.
Yeah.
So wherever the chickens have been,
Yeah.
that's where you get because it's so
Yeah.
highly fertile.
But you'll just top it.
Yeah. Ooh, right, we're just going to go over here. The clover in? Yeah, so it will be ploughed. So there's...
doesn't get harmed then?
Well, the thing with organic is that you're giving that 2 to 3 years of rest to fully recover. So it's interesting for organic growers because the plough is not evil, but ploughing every year is evil.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So it's a balance between how intensive you are with your growing. Yeah, sorry, I should have checked for trip hazards. There's some trip hazards here, by the way. Yeah. So this is our protected cropping. Like I said, having different growing methods of growing allows you to be more resilient. It allows for a longer season, a more varied season. Particularly if you sell direct, we need as long a season as possible, but also as much variety as possible. So if I'm going to put a cabbage in a veg box, it's probably got to be one of 5 different cabbages every week, so it seems like it's different. So that variety is really important to us. So in behind you we have cucumbers. So we have a tunnel of cucumbers and beans, aubergines and peppers, agretti, which is like a relative of samphire, slightly salty vegetable. And then we have basil, and then tomatoes, and then we have some other herb crops. So as you can see, we're getting all these plants going in modules, in trays. And the advantage of doing it in trays is that when we do plant out in our polytunnels, the space is really valuable in the polytunnel. You know, obviously it's covered, we water it, a lot of labour goes into it. So we want to make sure that there's a plant in every single station and it thrives. That's why we get things going in trays. It also means that you can steal a bit of time. So rather than putting it in the plant, a seed in the soil waiting for it to become a plant, you've done sort of 2 to 3 weeks of that work on a tray while you still got crops in the polytunnel. So it just means that you can relay things a lot more efficiently. Now, while we're here, I just wanted to point out the mess. Can you see at the end of the polytunnels, there's all sorts of mess. There's you've got nettles behind you. We've got comfrey next to the cold frame over there. We've got lots of places where critters love hanging out. Okay, so we don't really mess around with that too much, but it's all to the benefit of the farm. So, for example, in the spring, aphids will go zoom in on the nettles, okay? But we've got them right near our tunnels. So why am I getting aphids near my tunnels? And it's because they hang out there, then the predators realize that there's a whole feast of aphids to be had. So by the time the aphids want to go into our polytunnels, I've got the predators there to control them. So all of this mess is a key part of how we can manage the critters. You know, all critters are good. If you didn't have the bad stuff, you wouldn't have the good stuff. So we try and encourage the whole of and particularly insect life to play out so that we can keep it in balance. The worst thing you can have is to eliminate all of your pests and then sit back and go, oh, great, I've got no pests, because the first thing that will come in are the pests again, with no predators because they've gone elsewhere. So it's just trying to make sure that the whole of the food chain is kept satisfied and kept in balance. And we've even tried to make a virtue out of things that we hate. So we're getting a lot of, this is mare's tail. And if you're a gardener, you'll think, well, you'll never get rid of mare's tail. But mare's tail is full of silicon. So what we do is we store it up and put it in the bins, let it rot down, and then we can reapply it onto our crops because it's actually a great trace element. The roots are really deep. They get that silicon from way far down in the soil. So that's a great way of making a virtue out of something that's a real pain in the whatevers, okay? And so that's true for a lot of things as well. Everything's got its place. And if you try and treat what could be considered a bad thing as part of a virtuous part of your system, then it makes me feel better for a start, but also you can start to see its value in the system as well. Okay, so as you walk past the cucumbers, I'm showing off here to my other grower friends here. There's some lovely, huge cucumbers in there that are doing well. They actually did suffer in the heat. We had a lot of discoloration in the leaves, but they've rebounded quite nicely since it's cooled down a bit. Okay, this is our propagation shed, which obviously at the moment is empty, but everything happens, particularly when it's cold, on that hot bench. So things tend to be on that hot bench for about a week when it's cold, and as soon as they germinated, then they go through a process of going into these cold frames to then start to mature. So there's a real sort of production line that goes on from there and then all into these other areas too. Okay, as we walk up, then you'll take a peek in the different tunnels. So this is our aubergine and pepper tunnel. You can see the aubergines here. Absolutely wonderful year for aubergines. They've loved the heat. It's been an absolute revelation. The other thing that we've done this year, which is the first time, is that we've raised early plants under grow lights, under LED lights, because early in the spring there just isn't the light levels to get plants going. So by having them under grow lights, it basically simulates that it actually feels like it's their real season, although they're in a protected environment where it's warm. And that extra light has really, I feel, made a huge difference to the vigor of our plants, particularly aubergines, peppers and cherry tomatoes that we'll see in the next tunnel. So as you walk past these little bits, you'll probably see lots of insects all over them. Okay, so that's an indication that something's going on and that there's a habitat there. And I like to think of these areas as like the coral reef of the market garden. So that's where the whole of biodiversity sort of plays out. And to have it as close to your crops as possible means that it's a benefit to us, because we can use that biodiversity either to pollinate or to eat things that affect our yields. So that's agretti. Agretti is monk's beard, if that's the English name. It's one of those unusual vegetables that actually is quite nice. Sometimes unusual vegetables are unusual for a reason, but that's if you cook it right, agretti is a lovely vegetable.
Where do you get your seeds from, George, for agretti? It's got to be fresh, isn't it?
From
Italian?
I got it from Smarties in Italy. Yeah, so we've got basil, we've got coriander's gone over a bit. But again, you'll see the coriander is flowering. Why take out the coriander when you can see it's absolutely covered in insects? So you're using the tail end of a cycle of a vegetable to make sure that you're attracting as much as possible into the polytunnel. So things have a use even past their sort of eat-by date. So this is the cherry tomato tunnel. This is actually on our picking list for the first time on Tuesday. I think some of the other growers have cherry tomatoes on already, but these are such vigorous plants. Like I said, with the grow lights and the extra help they've had in the beginning, is that they really responded well to that treatment. So it's right at the beginning of the season. We're picking about 40 kilos a day of cherry tomatoes at the moment. And last year we had about 600 kilos of cherry tomatoes from a tunnel this size. I think this year we're going to get close to 2 tons. So I think that treatment at the beginning, and plus the weather has been lovely, has made a huge difference to our potential yields. They're all trained on what's called the clipper system. So they're all on these rods, and they have 2 clips on them. Get rid of this dog. So they have a supporting clip to hold the vine, and then they have another clip that stops it from falling over. And so when the vine gets too high, then we drop this one down, and then put the bottom clip up the top. So at the end of the season, the root will be in one place, but about 10 or 15 meters along will be the actual vine going up. So we're constantly lowering it down so that we're getting as much fruit as possible throughout the season. Very cool. Okay, so this is our no-dig market garden. So no-dig is fairly self-explanatory. We don't cultivate it. There's 2 major benefits to no-dig gardening. One is that they're really good at suppressing annual weeds, so you get less weed burden in your crops. We still do have some, so we still do some weeding, but it's nowhere near as bad as it would be in a cultivated field. The other reason is that it's excellent at holding moisture. So our moisture retention in a no-dig system is far superior. So in our sandy soil, we would have to be pretty much watering our courgettes all the time. But in no-dig, we can get away with twice a week, and we get a good crop. So we're on mains water here, which is very expensive, very limited. So we do try and preserve the water as much as possible. Now these 4 rows here were under this tunnel. This is a movable tunnel funded by OxFarmToFork. Thank you. And what it enabled us to do is to get courgettes going out of season much earlier than the season. So we put our first courgettes on the marketplace about 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, something like that. Whereas courgettes have only really been at full speed for the last 2 weeks outside. So it gave us a good sort of 4 weeks head start on our courgettes. But because it's movable, we've now moved it over to the next door where we've got another tunnel of aubergines and peppers. So we've doubled our production in terms of aubergines and peppers by having this movable caterpillar tunnel. So we had a caterpillar tunnel previously, and that's got our beef tomatoes in. So before we just had one tunnel for tomatoes, we'd have to share it between beef tomatoes and cherry tomatoes. Now we've got two, so if we're getting potentially 2 tons of cherry tomatoes here, maybe the same, it's basically been a huge shift in our ability to produce tomatoes. And I think Jamie as well, where's Jamie? He's over there somewhere, but Jamie's also got a caterpillar tunnel and he's doing something similar. So just in our 2 systems, we've really amplified our ability to do production. So this no-dig market garden is in 5 zones. It's in a rotation. The biggest difference between here and in the field is that we don't have that green manure break. So we're applying compost as our fertility in here, but we're cropping all year round, every year in rotation. So we've got courgettes here, we've got field cucumbers, we've got beans up there, we've got charred spinach over there. This is our brassica plot, but we've got aubergines and peppers in the brassica plot. And then we've got tomatoes with, I think it's lettuce as well going on there. So that's all in a rotation. If you can imagine that we've got the polytunnels, the no-dig market garden, we've got the field scale, we've got another version of the field scale here. We've got 4 or 5 different rotations that we've all got to be planning. So it's a big spreadsheet to help us manage what's going to go where. And these beetle banks, you know, whether the trees, some have trees, some don't, are actually a really good guide for us because it gives us standardized plots. We know what's going to go in what plot, and they're all similar areas. So the beetle banks help us in organization, help us in biodiversity, and they look nice. So particularly when they're flowering. So there's an awful lot going on here. So what I guess what I really want to stress is that a farm like this is really good for biodiversity because that's at the core of our aims. It's really good for resilience because we're growing so many things. It's good for season extension, so we can have a long season. But also because we're like this, we can be involved in the community a lot more. So we have a special needs group that come once a week and help us do jobs. We have volunteers who are customers who come and work with us on Mondays. So we're actually really very welcoming for people to come on the farm and see how we farm. We do lots of open days, and I think our method of farming is very recognizable to how you might farm in your back garden. If you went on and saw a big sprayer and chemicals, you go, well, I don't really understand what's going on here. This is really a recognizable type of farming. And I think what I'm trying to do personally is to try and demonstrate that this type of farming can be profitable as well, so that other people, it can be an example of a way of growing beyond our hedgerows. Okay, any questions about the no-dig?
How much land have you given over to this? I cannot estimate.
It's about an acre, I think, roughly speaking.
That's good.
That's actually quite a big no-dig area. I think there are other growers who have a similar no-dig size, but it takes a lot of work. Everything on here is manual, so there's with a few exceptions, but by and large this is all manual labour. So 80% of the work actually happens here and there, even though it's a tiny percentage of the farm. The nice thing about having field scale crops is that you can get the large scale efficiencies with machinery. So potato harvesting, planting, weeding, but field scale really has to be done in the perfect time of the season. If you try and force it too far out of the season, you'll run into problems. So we do our bulk crops in the field, and then the real season extension stuff in the market garden and the polytunnels. Okay, So does it make the flavour better? I hope so. I don't know whether you guys have noticed when you're cooking the difference, but I think there's probably two things in my mind that will enhance flavour. One is the freshness, so the time to harvest it and to get it on the plate. But the other, I think, is if a plant has had a hard life, it needs to protect itself. So if it has a hole, if it's been eaten by an insect, it says, right, there's something out there that's attacking me. I now need to start to build up the tools to protect myself. And that directly relates to the flavour profile of a plant. So if you give it healthy soil to generate those tools to protect itself, and you allow some degree of predation or attack on it, it will feel like it's in a real world and it has to build up those tools to protect itself. And those are the very things that's healthy for us and produce flavour in the plants. So I would encourage you to celebrate the little hole in the saddle leaf because I think that means that it's grown with a real world environment. I think if you had underground strawberry plants in the tube station in London, it would be perfect plants, but would they be as healthy and as flavourful? I doubt it. So I think one up for the hole in your salad leaf. Yep.
Can I just add to that?
Yep.
Just from a point of view of flavonoids, which are the things that you taste, are very long, complicated, complex molecules. The healthier the plant is, the more photosynthesis it's doing. It's Fred's tea break. The more energy the plant has to make the longer complex molecule. So therefore, the more flavour there is. So the healthier the plant equals essentially more flavonoid. So yeah, which is basically what George said.
Yeah, and I think it's it all comes back to respecting the pests as well as the predators. If you're looking after the whole of the food chain, I think we're more successful and we produce better produce.
And nutrient density as well is much higher.
So one up for agroecological growing, I think. And actually what's really exciting, and Good Food Oxford is part of a study to look into this, is to actually make hard links between the nutrient density and the methods of growing. And so we're part of a small group that's looking at doing that, looking at the different compounds that are in the plants and how that relates to flavour, taste, health and growing methods. So exciting things. I think we all intuitively know this, and I've seen personally a big shift in nutritionists who are now starting to see these things. And I think now what we need is the hard scientific facts to back that up and make it part of the information canon. Okay. If you really want to see what a flea beetle does to Cavolo Nero, you can walk over here. So this is a Cavolo Nero that's been flea beetled, and I wouldn't expect that to pass as produce to the colleges. So that's why it's not there. But I think that this will recover. So the new leaves, we probably have seen the worst of the flea beetle. So I think that will disappear, and the new leaves will give us really good kale. Luckily, out in the field, they've been covered and protected from flea beetle right from the off. So the kale out in the field looks absolutely perfect. But yeah, here where it's been uncovered, it's been particularly hard hit. So does that look familiar for other growers? Yeah, it's been a horrible year for it, very hot. Okay, any questions about that? Good. All right.
How easy is it to move the tunnel? Like, how much work does that do?
If you move it adjacent, like we have, it took about 4 hours.
How many people?
It was me on my own for about half of that. Okay. And then we all pile in to do the hoop moving and putting on the cover. So it's actually pretty manageable. The other thing I would say is that in polytunnels, in fixed polytunnels, rotation becomes a problem. Because peppers, aubergines, tomatoes are such relied on crops in polytunnels, they are very closely planted together year after year. So by having a caterpillar tunnel, we've almost got limitless rotation because we can include it as part of our no-dig market garden. So we're not following, we can double our peppers and our tomatoes and aubergine space without actually messing around with that, that rotation. So it gives a lot of flexibility.
Are you growing as much as you can do on this farm? Or is there
I think on the market garden area and the polytunnel size area, we're probably at about 85 to 90% of what we can do. I think we can do a bit more. Where we can make really big gains is in the field, and that includes investment in water, so irrigation, but also specialist machinery to allow you to do really interesting ways of planting and cropping. So I think we've got a lot of growth potential in the field scale, but fairly limited in the market garden scale because we're kind of reaching our optimum in this area. But we do have growers here. So Fred is a really good field scale grower. So he is for me the model of what I would like to be able to do in my field scale. So what's great about the OxFarmToFork program is that there's a whole mix of farms who are really good at doing certain things, and so that offers choice and variety across the scheme. Okay, cool. Right, well, head back. I don't know what the time is.
It's about
One, okay, not too bad. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they come up in the wheel marks first, so yeah.
Yeah, it's there.
George, have you had quite a bit of rain? You have, haven't you?
Yeah, but look how it's dissipated. I mean, that had full on rain.
Yeah, we got 4.5 mil. That's it.
We haven't had any.
No. Bloody deer took my first succession out completely overnight.
Really?
Is that ready to eat?
Yeah,
Nearly.
definitely.
Can I have a nip bit?
Well, after I've showed people.
Show off.
Yeah.
Give me a bit. My first sweet corn of the year. This is fabulous. Wow.
So this is our first sweet corn of the year. Typically, the first successions, the plants are pretty, they're only about 4 foot high. And you typically only get 1 cob per plant on the early varieties. The later they are in the season, the much bigger the sweet corn are, and then you can get 2 or 3 cobs from each one. So I am half American, and I really celebrate sweet corn, and I really celebrate squash and pumpkins. So I get so happy when this comes along. Now I would like to say that the past 2 years we've got this earworm, this little bug that goes into sweet corn. Last year it only affected the last succession, so it was only in the tail end. But I wanted to keep growing sweet corn so that the prey is there, the pest is there, hoping that a predator will then come along at some point and start to control it. So I'm going to be growing sweet corn even if I have losses until something comes along and tries to control it. So that's one example of how I'm trying to think of the long game rather than the short-term profit here or there. But it does mean that some of these will have an earworm. This one's perfect. So the ones that I've listed on for the colleges next week there's a caveat. There's a caveat that says most of them will be like this, but there may well be something when you shuck it. Unfortunately, we can't really tell very easily whether it's got one in it or not. So the benefit is that the flavour is amazing. And if I don't know in catering, but quite often it's quite unwieldy to put a whole cob on someone's plate. But if you're doing sections of sweet corn, then it's absolutely perfect just to cut off the one little bit that might have a grub in it. So
You don't have a deer problem, George?
we do have lots of deer, but they've not really affected us too much. They do eat the dwarf beans and in the market garden, but they've left our sweet corn alone. And I think Jamie is actually growing sweet corn in a tunnel. Is yours ready?
Been and gone.
It's been and gone. So there you go. That's a good example of how a protected crop can really extend the season out and push the season out. So this is actually pretty early for field scale sweet corn. We tend to have sweet corn about 2 or 3 weeks before everyone else in the field, and the reason is that this is a really sandy soil. So I mean that's virtually sand, which means that it dries out really quickly in the spring. It's slightly south facing, and they say each degree of angle south facing is worth about 5 days in the season. So this is maybe 4 or 5 degrees. That sort of starts to add up, and you get a really good place to grow sweet corn. However, this field is horrendous at retaining moisture in the summer, so really only good for doing spring crops, and then it's not very good. This is our pumpkin patch, and we have a pumpkin day that we invite the public to come in and pick their own pumpkins. So I've raised all these by hand so that we've got exactly the species I want in exactly the same place. But I do have some spaghetti squash. I think that I've put spaghetti squash on the list for next week anyway, I can't remember. But personally, spaghetti squash is not very exciting culinary. It's got an interesting texture, but so if you guys are really good at using it, I'd love to know how you do it so that I can explain it further. But yeah, so for our customers like it for the texture rather than the flavour. It's like a canvas to put flavours in rather than the main event. So I would like at this point, we just walked past this Charlotte potatoes, so they've been topped, so it just looks like a field. But we've been harvesting potatoes now for quite a while, and we started to put them on the list in a much more meaningful way next week. So I think some people have already ordered them for next week. But there's something about potatoes that are not irrigated. I think they're really tasty. I know some really good organic growers who grow lots of very successful potatoes, and they just don't taste quite as nice. I think it is the lack of irrigation that really amplifies the flavour. So we're about to go and eat. This is a really good time to ask any questions if you have any questions, or about us, the farm, OxFarmToFork, or anything else.
Have you enjoyed the season?
Hang on. Do you want, who's asking
No,
questions? Do you want to,
well, have I enjoyed the season? I would say it's okay, Oscar. I'll just, so the season, I would much rather have this season than last year's season. It was cold and wet. It's had its real challenges, but the things that have been really successful have been really successful. So it's hard work. We do have trickle tape irrigation for the field if something's really struggling, but we can only water one bed at a time every 2 hours. And if you imagine we've got somewhere between 200 and 250 beds, there's no way that you can water everything on a weekly basis. So we're just literally trying.
Is it mains or a borehole? Or
it's all mains water.
mains water?
Yeah. For the first time ever, I've applied for grant funding from the government to capture rainwater harvesting off the barns, so that we can use the water in our market garden. And certainly our long-term aim is to dig a reservoir and collect water when it's abundant in the winter, and then use that in the spring and summer. But that we're talking about lots of investment there, probably 150,000 minimum to do that sort of stuff. So it's I know that we would pay that back It's just having the kahunas to start that off.
So small composting over there, what do you do for compost?
Yeah, so we do create our own compost. That is all the waste from the market garden and the polytunnels. And our head market gardener now has a thermometer and is quite sort of geeky about checking the temperature. But essentially, to do hot composting, you've got to get it to a certain temperature to kill the bad stuff. But if it's too hot, it kills the good stuff. So you want to turn the compost every time it gets to that ideal zone of in between killing bad and killing good. So we're creating compost, and the really good thing about creating compost that's sterile, because that heat sterilizes the seeds, is that you can be quite sparing with it, and it provides an awful lot of activity to your growing area. So you don't have to have tons and tons and tons of it. Having some of it that's really biologically active can be of huge benefit to your growing area.
We do composting.
You do composting.
Chat later.
Good, good.
A rated static pile so you don't have to turn.
Yeah, so the Johnson Sue, there are a number of different methods of doing static ones with tubes and things like this.
No.
Oh, I do have to have a chat then. Yeah, so composting is definitely part of the cycle, especially in areas where we can't afford to put green manures down for long periods, like in the polytunnels or in the no-dig market garden. Okay, we good? We're hungry?
Yeah.
Let's go eat then.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you.